So, hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, General Rehearsal. We are very happy to have with us today Sir András Schiff. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast with us. It is truly a great honor for all of us. My name is Tähe-Lee, and I am Sir András Schiff's student at the Barenboim Said-Akademie.
And I am Hayyan. I am also a student of the Barenboim Said-Akademie. I study with Professor Shaga, who is the assistant of Sir András Schiff.
When we started to prepare for this podcast, we were afraid that we would ask you some questions that might bore you, since you have done so many interviews already in your life. And we actually started to wonder how many interviews you think you have done, and have you said no to some of them? And if you have, then based on what do you accept or refuse an interview?
Probably too many interviews. Haven't counted them. Of course, there are many requests for interviews, more than ever. The world has changed, and not to the better. I'm now 71 years old, and so when I started to give concerts, the procedure was that you were invited to give a concert, and you arrived and you did it, and that was it. Today, there is hardly a concert that you can do without interview requests. Somehow, people who present concerts, they seem to be pathologically afraid that the audience will not come. So you have to attract the audience, and they hope that through interviews they will create more attention. Whether that's true or not, I cannot answer. So I try to help the presenters. If they feel that, they announce a concert with me and nobody will come, and if an interview will help, then let's do the interview. But then, what bothers me with interviews, when the interviewer has nothing relevant to ask, then, for example, number one question is, why have you chosen this program? That's the most stupid question you can ask, because the answer to that is, first of all, why not? And the second answer is, because I love this music. And why do you like the music of Johann Sebastian Bach? Then I say, why do you like the sunshine? Or how do you explain a natural phenomenon which should be obvious to anybody who doesn't have a heart made of stone? But if you have to start to explain what is special about Johann Sebastian Bach, then there is something very wrong. I mean, the person who asks that question will never understand the music of Bach anyway.
Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned the question that you were not really fond of, maybe to start, we can ask you what is a question you thought or expected a professional interviewer would ask you, but they actually never did, and you would like to share this with us.
You see, now you asked a very good question, but I cannot tell you what to ask. It has to come from you.
So maybe let's hope that we...
And you can surprise me.
Yeah, let's hope we planned good surprising questions. I think it's good to start from the very beginnings, and with that comes, I find it also always extremely impressive how dedicated you are to your class, amongst the incredible amount of things that you also have to do at the same time. And I think to do all of this at such high quality takes an extreme amount of discipline. And I always wondered, where do you derive your discipline from? Was it something you kind of built on your own and improved, or was it something that your family gave you when you grew up?
Discipline is a key word. Well, first of all, there is talent. Talent is not unimportant, but it's not enough. For your talent, for your ability, you have to be very grateful because you were born with that. It's in your genes. You haven't done anything to get that. But to keep that alive and to develop on it, that is your responsibility. And here comes the word dedication and discipline. It's very, very hard work. I don't have to explain that to you or to anybody who is here, that you have to find a certain order in your life. We speak a lot today about freedom, liberty. Yes, that's very important, but as one of my great idols, Pablo Casals, said, freedom with order. Freedom without order is anarchy. And anarchy in society is a very bad thing. Anarchy in art and music is a very negative category because it suggests that anything goes. You can do anything. Well, in music, let's say about music that we recreate. I'm not talking about composition, that's a higher category. So we performers are not creators but recreators. So not the best but the second best. Somehow composers do need performers because without us people don't hear the music. But so a composition, a piece of music, especially a great piece of music, presents its framework of laws, so not anything goes within that framework, but not outside of that framework. If Beethoven writes in a piano sonata, you go from pianissimo and you have to do a crescendo until mezzo forte, and then comes a subito piano. Then you cannot do the opposite. Many people do the opposite and they think they are very original and very interesting. But I am vehemently against that. Actually, there should be a law against that. But we are not in a police state, luckily. And so discipline is to find your regular rhythm of life. And this is individual. I mean, some of you like to go to bed to sleep early. Others, I like to go to sleep very late. But certainly to get up sometime in the morning, maybe 8 o'clock, and then my best hours are 10 to 1 in the morning. But I have known, one of my greatest idols was a Hungarian pianist called Annie Fischer. I mean, she got up at 3 in the afternoon and she never practiced. But she was really fantastic, so in spite of that. But we have to find that, and that takes a lot of discipline because sometimes we don't really feel like getting up. We don't really feel like sitting down and working on music, on details. But it has to be. Mm-hmm. It's like a daily hygiene.
Do you think that teachers have an influence on the students' discipline? Should they guide them in that sense?
Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. Teachers are very, very important, and they are an inspiration, but also a guiding force. And one of my greatest teachers, Ferenc Rados, who just passed away, unfortunately, at age 90, but among other things, he taught me how to practice well, because people have the wrong idea that the more you practice, the better, and that is really not right. You have to practice economically and intelligently, and not wasting time, because we all have only 24 hours a day. And how do you distribute that 24 hours? You have to sleep, you have to eat, you certainly have to study. But I think that if you practice, let's say, 3 hours, but with intelligence and musically and economically, you achieve much more than with 8 hours of mechanical wood chopping. That doesn't lead anywhere. And we all have to be much more than just musicians. I mean, I want to be as complete a human being as possible, and this is what I try to give to the students, to be a complete person and learn languages and read as much and really good literature, and go to the museums, go to the cinema, go to the theater, study philosophy, be interested in history, in the sciences, and then go for a good walk and be in the fresh air, see your friends. So this all takes time. And if you practice 10 hours a day, then there is no more time.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ferenc Rados and that he taught you how to practice well. But you have also mentioned in your past interviews and in your book that you had also very harsh experiences with him, and that sometimes you would even start crying after the lessons. And I was wondering, did you ever lose self-belief after those harsh experiences with him? And if you did, then how would you regain that?
It was very harsh, yes. I hope not to be that harsh with you. One has to be severe and strict, yes. But he went very far, and I was too young, maybe 14, 15. It's an early age. And there was a lot of crying, not in the lessons, but afterwards. But I never lost faith. I tried to take it positively. I don't know where your self-belief comes from. It's a delicate balance. Believing in yourself, but also never be satisfied, never be full of yourself. Always be humble, modest. We are surrounded by today the word genius is. I hear somebody tells me, "Oh, I heard a young pianist, she's a genius." So I say, then what is the word you use for Mozart then? when genius becomes a commonplace. So Mozart is a genius, but then a talented kid is something else. And but if you don't have self-belief, you will never be able to walk onto a concert stage. It's very difficult to find the right balance and to feel that I did everything I could to get ready, to get prepared for this concert, but I am not a machine. You have your better days, your worst days, but even a weaker day should not be too bad.
Yeah, I cannot agree more about what you said about the balance. And I'm sure many pianists our age, in their 20s, they kind of have this fear that they won't be recognized for what they want to be recognized. And we were wondering if you ever related to this, if that resonates with you when you were in your 20s. Did you have these worries that the world won't recognize you for what you want to be recognized for?
What means recognition?
I guess in that sense, it means what you have to offer musically to the world and how you interpret your music and bring the composer's music to life.
First of all, you really have to love music more than life, if possible. So it's being a musician is not a job. It's not a profession. It's a great gift and a privilege. So we have to have gratitude. And of course, when I was your age, I did have my doubts, and it was never easy, and it's not easy now. But I believed then, and I do believe now, that if you have something valuable and genuine to say, then sooner or later it will be recognized. Somebody will hear it, somebody will listen to it, and you cannot force that. There are no shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe that one terrible word is career. I hate this word. And there is this career-minded music making. You can recognize it immediately. It's also how I call it the visualization of music. Music is not a visual art. Painting is a visual art. Sculpture is a visual art. Even architecture, to some extent, is a visual art. It's functional too and structural. But music is not. And yet there are certain visual elements that somebody comes on a concert platform and there is an audience and they see this person. So I mentioned Annie Fisher, and that's the most positive example, because she was so simple as possible, but the door opened and she walked on stage, and it was like the queen has arrived. And she was not making any theater, she was just beautiful, and the dress was beautiful and very simple, not flashy. So when I heard the same concert on the radio, I missed this moment of the door opening and she walking on stage. That's not on the radio. Similarly, my first concert experiences with Sviatoslav Richter in the 1960s, I was still sitting in my mother's lap, and it was volcanic. I cannot ever forget this. And I was an 8-year-old child, and he just rushed to this piano, and this Schubert late pieces, and I had like goose pimples. Then I hear it on the radio, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So there is that element. And yet today, the visualization of music, that I have the feeling that people are sitting in the audience and they are not listening to me, they are watching me, and there is nothing to see. They want to sit on that side to see my hands. What are you seeing on my hands? Normal hands. There was a pianist, Vladimir de Pachman. He was very funny in the first half of the 20th century, and he would play something, and he would play a passage with his right hand and would cover it with his left hand. And they asked him, why are you covering your hand? Because he says, my colleague Leopold Godowski is sitting in the audience and he should not copy my fingering. So that is a funny anecdote. But yeah. You know what I'm saying, that the visualization, and I always tell also students, why are you doing this? I call it choreography.
Yeah.
If I want to see a choreography, I go to the ballet. But you shouldn't be doing these movements and also these facial. Sometimes it's these grimaces are terrible. Of course, you have to express a certain emotion. But Mozart has a beautiful letter to somebody says that Mademoiselle Auernhammer or somebody is playing my sonatas, and she's making the most awful grimaces. And she says, Mozart, people say that when Mozart plays, then the playing is so expressive, and yet there are hardly any facial grimaces or expressions. So it's all in the sound.
You mentioned your students, and we actually wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that after this podcast you will be teaching here in this auditorium. And as someone who comes to the lessons only to listen, I find it very interesting that you have 5 extremely different students with very, very different personalities, and yet you always manage to bring the best out of each of them. I always wondered, when they play for you in the run-through, do you listen to each of them with different ears and then teach them accordingly, or do you look for something specific in a student that applies to all?
My ears are the same.
Yeah.
I cannot change them. Yeah. But the personality of each student is very important. I respect that enormously. So there are several aspects here in pedagogy, because first and foremost is the composer and the piece. This is sacred. So we all try to get as close as possible. And yet, on a secondary level, we are all different. So 10 different people play the same piece of music, and it's never identical, even if we are all trying to be very faithful to the text. So a good teacher is like a good psychologist and a good doctor too. I mean, medicine, each of us have our package of problems, mental and physical and emotional and whatever, but this has to be put in accordance with the composer and with the piece of music. So we all suffer today, I'm sure we agree on it, that the world is in a terrible state.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult to get up in the morning and read the news, and each day is worse than the previous. And what do we do? And yet, at the same time, when we played a piece of music which was written 250 years ago, then we have to somehow overcome the difficulties of today. And still we cannot forget it. So a good doctor has patience. Each patient is also an individual, and I think the bad doctor is who has too much ego. Even doctors have egos, and how? Self-importance. And they should be looking at each individual and how can I help this person? But in a constructive, in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's possible to find an equilibrium between all these different levels.
Yeah, I find it great that you support the individuality of each student.
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah.
And students should never be copies of each other.
Yeah.
It's also not possible. But there are certain teachers you can recognize the
Yeah.
pupils. But there, for example, there was a legendary piano teacher in Vienna, beginning of the 20th century, Theodor Leschetizky. And each student is, and we have recordings of the students are like Artur Schnabel, like Ignaz Friedman, Osip Gavrilovich, up to Mieczysław Horszowski, whom I still knew very well. And they are very different, but what is in common, that the sound production, the piano sound is gorgeous. So this Leczetitsky must have known something about tone production. And tone production is something in piano there is very little being spoken about.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned also in your book about sound production that Ferenc Rados knew the secrets of sound, and I think each of your students has had the experience that each time when we are in your class and we play for you and then you come to the piano and you show or demonstrate us something, then your sound is truly just out of this world, and we all think that we aren't possibly capable to make the same kind of sound or even near as good a sound as you make. And you have also talked about how one has to develop a third ear. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering if there are any other secrets of sound, perhaps, that maybe Rados taught you specifically.
No other secrets, but it's true that also when Rados showed me something, I felt I can never ever do this. I mean, he could like take with one finger one note on the bottom of the piano and on the very top, which is impossible to connect. But he connected it without the pedal, and then gradually I was also able to do it. But any instrument, you make a sound, first comes the imagination, then comes the realization, not the other way. So you cannot produce a sound that you have not thought of, that you have not imagined. So we have to develop our fantasy, our musical and general fantasy, general imagination, and that's also why I said that we have to live a complete life. I mean, you have to know, you have to have experienced a lot. If I tell you to start a piece like a forest murmur, but if you have never been to a forest, then how do you imagine it?
Yeah.
I remember once, it wasn't here in masterclass, a Japanese student was playing the C minor sonata of Schubert, and so I asked him, have you heard or do you know the song cycle Winterreise? No. I say, but this music in the second movement are these steps, and it's like somebody is walking in the deep, very cold winter, walking in the snow, and each step is heavier and heavier. I said, have you ever walked in the snow? No. But I said, but even in Japan, there is the northern island Hokkaido. You have been to Hokkaido only in the summer. End of discussion.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about your experience as a teacher and mentor, and I see that as part of the audience in your lessons, I see that you really enjoy teaching so much. So my question is, do you enjoy teaching so much, and why?
I love teaching, and more, and now is the time. This was not necessarily so many years ago. Mm-hmm. I tried teaching as a young man in Budapest chamber music, and I certainly had my wonderful teachers, and I learned from them. But I didn't know enough. I still don't know enough. It's work in progress. But when you arrive at a certain stage, then you feel now it's time to to give it back or give it on to the next generations. And the time has come about, not even 10 years ago. The funny thing is that in most countries, when you are, let's say, 65 years old, then they force you to retire. And that's about the time when you are beginning to know something. So it's ironical.
Yeah.
Do you feel that your experience in teaching has changed over time? And do you see that you have just grown as a teacher over the time since you started?
Hopefully. I would like to, yes. And I always learn from my own mistakes, but also from other people's mistakes. And I've watched a lot of other people teach and masterclasses and so. And I think the worst thing, I'm not going to mention any names, of course, but when somebody screams and shouts and stops the student sometimes even before the first note, let alone after the first note.
Yeah.
And then this constant stop and go and constant interruption, it causes general frustration. So for me, rule number one is that I think there's never been a case different, that you always, for me, play a piece from beginning to end.
Yes.
Even if I disagree with it, but you have the right to present it. Mm-hmm. And after that we can start discussing and talking. But I will never interrupt you, because that is very negative and very rude. And by the way, this experience I carry on as a conductor, because it's the same thing with orchestra rehearsals. When a conductor stops an orchestra in the beginning and he does it 2 or 3 times, it's a lost case. The orchestra will hate his guts. Rightly so.
Yes, and just because you mentioned the format of your lessons, I will take the opportunity maybe to ask about the fact that you open the lessons for other students to attend, which is something other teachers don't do. I have the privilege to be present, and I learned so much just from sitting and listening. I was just wondering, because when I was reading Music Comes Out of Silence, which was a joy to read, you mentioned that instruction for you is a private matter. So even though, and that masterclasses are not ideal platforms of education, even though your lesson format here is not necessarily a masterclass, but you still allow this private setting of few students, other students attending to learn. Is this a sort of a sacrifice that you make for the knowledge of a wider audience, or is it a conscious decision with other incentives so you offer your students even more experience?
Of course, one could do lessons between 2 people, eye to eye and ears to ears. And maybe there are advantages to that. But I have opted for this option because it was also my own experience. My lessons were always not really group lessons, but I never missed an opportunity to listen to my classmates. I mean, and my classmates were brilliant, like Zoltán Kocsis always had the lesson after me. And he was older and ahead of me, so I just learned. And I learned much more from listening to my classmates than from my own lessons. So, and I'm aware of it, that for all of you who play in front of the whole class and even in front of listeners, and it's psychologically more difficult, and it's also maybe not pleasant to be criticized in public. But of course, one does it that, again, the psychology comes in, so you will never be as severe in public than you would be if we were just two people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's stimulating for I mean, you have to tell me if it's true, but I feel that it's good for you that there are others listening. It prepares for the future. It prepares for a concert experience.
Yeah, and it's also very helpful for us listening, because as you said, if you're just listening and you don't have the pressure of performing, then you absorb information in a much easier way. But something else actually that you mentioned about teaching in your book is your interest sometimes to teach pianists who are not aspiring to be professionals. And that was really thought-provoking for me. Why?
Because this I believe in passionately, that our musical pedagogical systems are fully concentrated on the education of future professionals. And not everyone is going to make it. I mean, let's be pragmatic and realistic. If you are a wind player, you are a string player, you have certain possibilities later to play in an orchestra, and even that is not very easy to get into. I mean, I hear from all sources that you apply for a violin position in a good orchestra, there are virtually hundreds of applications and only for one place. But still, that is much more than what pianists have. Because what are the options for pianists? I mean, there is the soloist way is very limited. There are pianists like sand on the seaside, and there is chamber music. There is teaching. I think one needs also very good pianists for coaching singers, but that's already a different field. And then we are at the end. On the other hand, we desperately need the listeners of the future. And when we talk today about the crisis of classical music, this is where I see the crisis. We have more than enough concerts, millions of concerts everywhere, but I notice that the audience is getting worse and worse. They don't know. Again, they are not listening to music. They are watching. What is going on here? How are the movements of the conductor? I mean, you ask somebody today, take a Mozart piano concerto, and you ask a member of an audience or even the concert presenter, was this a great performance, a good performance, a mediocre performance, or an awful performance? And most people would not be able to tell you. They would say, it was interesting, or it was boring. For example, take this adjective boring. What is boring to, a lot of people think that I am very boring because there is no choreography, He just plays the notes and nothing happens, But they cannot tell me why I am boring. And Claudio Arrau, wonderful pianist, in his book he says this, my advice to young musicians, don't be afraid to be boring. Because what is boring to him is very interesting to me. Take a great painter, Cézanne. He would paint the same mountain Mount Saint-Victoire near Aix-en-Provence, over and over and over again. In the morning, at sunshine, and in the afternoon at sunset, and it's not boring. It's always different.
Definitely, yeah.
So this is. Don't be also afraid what people are saying, and don't try to please everyone. We cannot please everyone. If you try to please everyone, you will please no one.
I want to take us back for a moment to a pianistic aspect for a moment, and I wanted to ask you, did you ever consciously evaluate or change things about your piano playing? I know that you don't like the word technique, so I will just say piano playing, because I feel, for example, that in the recent years I've experimented very much with, for example, how high my piano bench should be or how high my wrists should be, and it seems to me as if all these things came to you very naturally and intuitively. Correct me if I'm wrong, but could you tell us a little bit about your experiences with that when you were younger?
Yes, with pleasure. It changed considerably, some of it consciously, and also thanks to people like Professor Rados. I used to have a terrible posture when I was young. Always my nose was touching the keyboard. There are pictures of it. Because my first teacher, Elizabeth Vadas, was a wonderful lady, and she said, yes, this is a terrible posture, but the kid is so musical, and don't bother him. And then Mr. Rados changed all that. And also very good what you said about the height of the bench. There is no rule for that, because we are physically all very different. So each one of us has to find the right height, and it depends on the proportions of your lower and upper body, and also your hands. Otherwise, what changed is also just observing people, and to realize that when you play the piano, then of course your fingers are touching the keys, but your fingers are just the soldiers, and the commander is higher up. So when you play the piano, then the whole body is playing, and the whole body participates in the sound production. And also many people have injuries from practicing too much or not using the body well. And if you delegate too much work to the fingers alone, and not using the arms, the shoulder, the back, then it can result in injuries which can be avoided. Another very important thing is breathing, which it sounds like the obvious thing, but ask yourselves the question, am I breathing properly? It's obvious for a wind player. It's obvious for a singer, but not for anyone else. And we need it just as much as they do. And if we are not doing something well musically, I also tell you very often in the lesson that this phrase is not right, so why don't you sing it? And you have to overcome your inhibition, because we all have to sing. It's as natural as breathing. And after you have sung that phrase, it cannot be wrong. And then you will have to translate the singing into the instrumental playing. So those things helped me to come to the right conclusions, because I'm now old enough to say that I have been playing the piano like 66 years without injury. So that's lucky.
You said also earlier that you don't understand why people like to sit on the left side of the concert hall and that there is nothing to see when you play. But I would actually like to argue against that. It is, I think, very fascinating, at least for me, and we have also discussed about this with Ali, that the way you play with your hands, your hand posture, is
Unique.
very unique and very perfect somehow.
Well, but it's individual. I mean, somebody just told me Horowitz played somewhere, and then there was there are these parties, and one of the sponsors said, "Mr. Horowitz, I mean, when I was studying the piano, my teacher told me to play with rounded fingers, and you play with flat fingers. Wouldn't you like to try to play with round fingers?" And Horowitz just said, "Shut up!" So, but for him it was good to play with flat fingers. And also, I tell you, sometimes I want a different sound, and try to play this with flatter fingers, because then it's pure physics that with the fingertips only a very small part of the flesh touches the keys. And so if you have a larger surface, it produces maybe a more profound sound.
Mm-hmm.
So since we are already speaking about technicalities, I would want to bring the discussion for a moment to the technicality of the industry. And I wanted to ask you, what can young pianists do for their careers outside of the competition world? Because we know that you are not very fond of competition, and one obviously very amazing opportunity, which I was very privileged to take part of, is the building bridges. But what about other young pianists who, let's say, don't have such supporting projects? How would you recommend them to build their careers?
You are correct about my views on competitions. I would like to see competitions disappear from the face of the earth, but that will never happen. They proliferate like mushrooms. And that is you mentioned the word industry. I find that the competition industry is a real industry, and there are some going on simultaneously right now. So if we don't support competitions, then we have to come up with alternatives. The building bridges is a very good alternative that I started. So to present each year 3 young pianists, not more than 3, because that it has to be limited somehow, and give them concert opportunities. But what happens, what other ways are there? I cannot give you an answer, I'm sorry. I would love to give everybody more chances, but as we said, there are very, very many pianists. And there are many opportunities, but not enough opportunities for all of them. So even if we don't call them competitions, but even to get into the building bridges, for me to choose 3 pianists, I have to listen to 100. About. Mm-hmm. So 97 will be very unhappy. I'm sorry, but I cannot please everybody. So the selection of the 3 pianists out of 100 is my personal selection. But at least there isn't a jury. And there is no no competition in that.
Maybe you can tell us also a little bit about how the Building Bridges project fulfills your vision and how younger pianists can build their careers, which is the positive side of the conversation.
Well, the positive side is that you have a carte blanche. You play what you want. I mean, you discuss it with me because I believe that a program has to make sense. I see a lot of, not just pianists, but programs are arbitrary. People play whatever comes in their mind. They play something what is ready. But a concert is not just entertainment, but it has an educational and a deeper element. So I would like you young musicians to be very curious and experimental. Also, don't just play what is expected or what is fashionable. Even have the curiosity. For piano, the repertoire is endless. It's huge. So, I mean, I don't know. Take the music of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. Almost nobody plays it, and there are like 12 volumes. So you go to the library and you play through that. I mean, take the music of Robert Schumann, one of the greatest composers, and basically pianists play the same 5 or 6 pieces, and there are that many. So I would say that 80% of Schumann's piano music is unknown because nobody plays it, or practically nobody. Then, of course, you have new music and contemporary music, which is very, very important, but it's not obligatory. You should play new music if you feel the devotion, and even within the new music, I mean, I'm always open to this, but I play much too little new music. I always have a bad conscience. I'm not doing enough. But honestly, there is very little that I love. There is a lot of very, very ugly new music. Horrible. And there is a lot of, the other day we had an audition here and somebody played a sonata by Clementi. It was awful. And I know there are good sonatas by Clementi, but this one was in G major. This was rubbish. And then there is no point. I mean, if you are a pianist, what's the point in playing bad music? But how do you define bad music? I mean, I know exactly what I'm talking about, but how many young pianists play the second sonata of Rachmaninoff? To me, that is a terrible piece. Really, very, very, very bad. And once I visited Vladimir Horowitz, who was a truly great pianist, and he says to me, "Why do you play all the Beethoven sonatas? They are not all so good." And I was too polite, but I should have asked him, and which ones do you have in mind which are not so good? And why do you play the second Rachmaninoff sonata, which is really not good? But he wouldn't have liked that, so I kept quiet. So to put it in a nutshell, be very curious in choosing your repertoire, whether it's old or new, and be very creative and try to put programs together which are fascinating. And if you are young pianist and you have your debut recital and you put on the Liszt B minor sonata, which is a masterpiece. I don't like Liszt, but the B minor sonata is a masterpiece. But then you play it sort of quite well, and then people say, yes, but Richter was better and Horowitz was better, and you are up against all that.
Yes.
So it's not a clever choice. A clever choice is what you did recently. Tähe-Lee played a wonderful recital of Scandinavian music. I mean, the only so-called better-known piece was the Greek ballad, which is wonderful, but even that is not so well known. And this program was like a breath of fresh air, wonderfully played, and you also, that's a very good thing that you talked about the program. You introduced it, because we talked about it, and then this concert was in Brussels, so people didn't know this repertoire, and they were very happy. And also, in my later years now, I don't announce my programs in advance, because it depends on inspiration, and certainly I have a few pieces ready to play, but it depends on the mood, on the acoustics, on the instrument, and then I tell the audience something about the music, about the composer, also something very personal, how you relate to that music, and this always comes across very well. So when we talked about education and educating the listeners, I think we, the performers, have to make an effort. Tell them something, because they don't have it from their homes. They certainly don't get it from school. The school curriculum is more and more limited. There is no room for music. And put together programs like that. That was the golden example.
It was indeed very refreshing and freeing to be able to put together a program like that. And also for me, it felt very natural to play these pieces because I come from Estonia. And speaking of niches, you've clearly developed your own composers who you play and who you're known playing. Would you encourage young musicians to develop their own niche? Because you said that you are encouraging everyone to experiment with a new or different music that is not played so often. But would you actually recommend young people to find a niche similarly like you?
If you are a clarinetist, which is a wonderful instrument, but you cannot say that I love Mozart, but I don't like Brahms. You cannot say that, can you? You see? So you play pretty much everything that there is for the clarinet, rightly so. But the piano repertoire is too big, and none of us can play everything well. So there we have to be selective and very, very self-critical. Certainly in your student days, you try everything out, and you can say that I feel at home, and here not so much at home. But even that is not so easy, because when I was your age, I had this huge difficulty with certain pieces of Beethoven, who is one of the greatest, no question, but a very difficult composer, because you cannot pigeonhole Beethoven. There are, you take a piece like Opus 109, or it's very different from 111. The Pastoral Sonata which I always felt very natural with. I was like fish in water. And then my professor, Kadosha, said, now you learn the Appassionata. And I played a terrible Appassionata. It was so bad. Because I was not a heroic by nature. And it's a heroic piece. So I had to, but I loved the piece, so I never gave up. And by the age of 50, it was like a suit or like a coat that you had to grow into to be able to wear it. So that was self-critical, but I never gave up. And then there are other composers who I just say, this is just not for me. Liszt is not for me. Rachmaninoff is not for me. So why people say, why don't you play this? Because first of all, I don't like it very much, and it's alien to me, and I should leave it to other people who love it. They can do justice to it. And then there are discoveries that you make later. To me, Janáček came much later, because I didn't know this music when I was your age. I was about 40, and when I got to know Janáček, and thank God for it. It's really wonderful. So I do encourage you to try everything, but then be selective and keep some things and discard others, and be sure that you cannot do everything.
Speaking of doing everything, I think it's very interesting that you decide what to bring to stage, even though, for example, last year I attended one of your concerts where you played Debussy, and it was truly one of the most magical experiences I had, and I always asked myself why I can't find all of Debussy's works, for example, recorded by you, or why you don't bring it on stage as much as other repertoire, even though you, correct me if I'm wrong, learned most of it or even all of it. So how do you make these decisions, what to bring on stage and what to keep private?
Debussy is interesting that you mentioned that, because I adore this music. But again, it came later, or I avoided it because of my background and my training. Also, I didn't know French well enough. I think this is very important. Then now I know French pretty well, but not well enough. It's not my strongest language, but the combination of language and music is an interesting point. If I'm lucky and I still have some years, then I would like to spend a lot of time with Debussy. But you have to decide what you want to play and what you want to study. At this point, with over 70, people ask me what new repertoire are you learning, and Debussy is the only exception, because I'm not increasing the repertoire but reducing it deliberately. I played the 32 Beethoven sonatas about in 30 cycles. It's enough.
Yes.
So. And I don't agree with Horowitz that there are not good Beethoven sonatas, but there are a dozen of Beethoven sonatas which I love more than the rest. So after having played the cycle, I concentrate on that 12 and try to get deeper under the surface. Not better, but always deeper, and there is no limit to that. You always discover something new, and you say, oh, how stupid I was. Why didn't I see this 10 years ago? It's so obvious. And it's obvious because it needs time. There are no shortcuts.
What advice would you give to these young pianists who want to learn, similarly like you did, all the works by the composers that you have learned? What kind of strategies or what would you recommend them?
Well, it depends on your curiosity. If you really love the composer and the pieces, then you are curious to know. Even if you don't play now the 32 Beethoven sonatas, but by learning one particular one, you have to know the others, and you have to know the string quartets, you have to know the symphonies, you have to know Missa Solemnis, you have to know Fidelio. So this goes in concentric circles, and it's your curiosity. But again, there is no obligation to do complete cycles. I never did this like a sport, far from it. Never wanted to set the Guinness Book of Records of, swimming through the ocean. Never interested me. But the musical curiosity, yes, very much so.
Can you actually tell us a little bit about your experience on stage and what does it feel like for you? Because for us, people who listen, I've shared that with you before. It's one of the only times that I feel something a little bit away from our materialistic world that is very hard to exist in the whole time. And I was wondering if you also, the music takes you somewhere else, or if you're in a different state of mind.
It does take you away, yes. Generally speaking, I don't live in an ivory tower. I observe the world and politics and society. I'm very sensitive to that. But with the music and live music, with many years of experience, I learned to enjoy making recordings in a studio, but I much prefer the live concert. Although, we are all humans, and we have to talk about nerves. We all have our nerves. It's very difficult. People ask me, why do you play so many concerts? And the answer is that, well, first of all, I love playing concerts and I love to share music with listeners. It's a giving experience. But playing regular concerts, certainly not every day, but with a certain regularity, reduces the nervousness. And there have been some cases in my life when I took a sabbatical, like 6 months, nothing. Practicing, yes, and studying and write. That's when I was writing my book. And I didn't play a concert for 6 months, but practiced a lot. So comes the first concert and I'm so prepared like never in my life, but I was virtually shaking, It was terrible to overcome that, and I cannot explain why were my hands shaking.
Did stage fright actually ever influence you so much that you weren't able to do something musically as well as you wanted to?
No, luckily not. It's only initial, but then you, because then you, again, the breathing helps, and also the belief. You believe that, you have done everything, and so this nervousness, and you tell yourself, this is not fair, this shouldn't be happening, and just believe in yourself, and also always think forward. This is also people also always ask, how do you play from memory? Memory is a matter of luck. You are born with a good memory or not. If you don't have such a good memory, then don't worry to use the score. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Then you play from the score. I play from memory most of my repertoire because that's how I feel better. But the secret of playing from memory and not mess it up is think forward, never sideways and never backward. We play something and let's say you made a mistake now, and then you start to I made a mistake and maybe I used the wrong finger, and why did I do it? In the meantime, the music is progressing forward, and you are like a train that gets off track.
Yes.
So whatever happens in the performance, don't get upset. And even even a gymnast or something, you fall off the horse, and then you get up and continue. Don't give up, and think forward.
I think thank you for the wonderful advice. It's something we always try to improve, and we wanted to ask you a little bit about, because this has to do with how calm one is from the inside, and we wanted to ask you about maybe some advice you can give us on how we can tidy our inner being in order for us to be calm enough.
Again, you have to discover your own. Let's say when you have a concert in the evening, what do you do that day? This is individual, but I can tell you what I do individually, that I go to the concert hall, hopefully it's available, and then I play 2-3 hours in the morning, trying out, play the whole program actually. And then it's very important what you eat and how you eat. Don't save on that. I mean the time. You have to have a good digesting system.
Yes.
It's very important. But as the late Pope says, it's very good to have a good digestion, but you have to have something to digest. So starving is not good. Then, to me, it's very important to sleep, or just to have a siesta. Half an hour is enough, or an hour, not more. And then we all have our routines. To me, like you have a terrible upright piano in the dressing room, but on stage is a beautiful piano. Mm-hmm. So I see this, a lot of people, they are practicing on the terrible upright piano until the last moment when it's time to go on stage. So it has nothing to do with that sound, and it would be better to be quiet and contemplate and concentrate on nothing but the composition, the piece, and how will be the first note. When that note sounds, it has already been in my mind and in my soul for hours. But if that first note is not right, then the whole concert is ruined. We can all pack and go home. And then I find we have to talk about this. It's good that you ask it. I see a lot of young people, concert, they come on stage the audience is there, then they start to fidget with the chair. It's terribly off-putting. And you could have done this an hour ago. Why now? Why when you get into this hall and the audience is not there yet, then go to the piano and look at the desk, the chair, and adjust it so that you sit down and you start. Music comes from silence. It comes from silence. It doesn't come from this.
Yes.
Similarly, I even tell my own orchestra, or even when it's a good orchestra, I can tell them, tune off stage. People come on stage, string quartet comes on stage, it's horrible, you know. I cannot listen to the program after that. And I say, why didn't you do that? Your violin will not get out of tune between the door and here. And you should start this wonderful experience of a concert from silence. So even such details are very important, and they are not being talked about, no?
Definitely.
It seems, though, that nowadays it is not enough to be just a good musician anymore and play well your instrument. And we started our conversation today with the fact that anywhere you go these days, people are coming to ask for interviews, and it seems that you have to be confident, a good storyteller, good at networking, and good at marketing also, as well as a good pianist. Do you think that all of this that is surrounding today, the performance and actually playing the music, do you think that it takes the focus away from the right things, or do you think it's in any way that it adds to it something?
You have to know the right proportions. By all means, do the social media, do the interviews, but you have to know the limit. I go this far and not more, because you need your time and concentration for the music. So if it's not out of proportion, by all means.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what we're doing currently is kind of part of that, because we're in a music school, but in this course where we record podcasts, where we also learn how to record our own tapes for auditions, it's part of our education now, and this podcast, General Rehearsal, is part of it. Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of our episode. I wish this conversation can continue for much longer. Thank you very, very much for joining us. It was definitely a pleasure for us, and we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And for our listeners, we hope to see you in the next episode.
I enjoyed it enormously, and thank you, both of you, for very intelligent, very, very good questions. And I hope to see you much more and hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.